Okay, so great. It is a pleasure for me to be here. I'm Adi, and today I will be presenting Nexus Zeta. Our newbie hacker managed to create a monster botnet. In general, this story combines aspects of nice vulnerability, a zero-day, significant exploitation, massive botnet, and of course, an interesting threat actor. Basically, all the components of a good story. In general, not cybersecurity-wise. So a bit about myself. I hold the position of IPS research team leader at Checkpoint. We conduct research on interesting devices, vulnerabilities, and attacks based on our sensors worldwide. And this story is a good example of that. Prior to Checkpoint, I've served as an officer in an Israeli military intelligence unit in various R&D positions. My academic background includes a master's in financial mathematics and a bachelor in applied mathematics. And I can say that in general, I really love network protocols. I'm not sure why, but I do. I mean, I love to see the gaps between how protocols should be implemented by the RFC and how eventually they're implemented in the wild. And this story, again, is a good example of that, as we will see later on. In my free time, I love to play soccer, but I wasn't that good at it. Although in Israel, it's very popular, but I wasn't in the front line. I really tried, but I wasn't. And this is a picture of my team playing laser tag. It was a really good experience, and I highly recommend. Okay, so the flow of this presentation will be first to provide an intro to the story, then to talk about universal plug and pay, UPnP, technology in general, and SSDP, simple service discovery protocol, as a major protocol in UPnP. Then we'll talk about relevant attacks. We'll share one concept of a very common attack regarding SSDP and UPnP, and two vulnerabilities that were found lately. And then we'll talk about our story, the Huawei vulnerability. We'll share the relevant process, and now we've managed to conclude that we have seen a new vulnerability out there, and interesting things regarding the attack and the campaign. Then we'll share some relevant insights regarding the impact of this attack. And then, of course, we'll talk about Nexus Zeta, the interesting threat actor behind the story. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so as we are in the age of things, we are evidence to this tremendous phenomenon of the rise in the number of IoT devices. Today, there is almost every device for every functionality in every industry, and we can mention cloud, healthcare, manufacturing, banking, energy. There are many more, basically, for every industry. We can also say that with this rise also came an interesting challenge, security challenge. Many of these devices implement proprietary protocols, which tend to be more vulnerable in some way. And this is also this problem of misconfiguration of devices, which is, again, an interesting challenge. But this is definitely something that we need to acknowledge. So let me share with you some relevant insights regarding the IoT market. It is estimated that more than 50 billion devices will be connected to the internet by the end of 2020. By the end of 2023, it's estimated that the market size of IoT will be more than $300 billion. The compound annual growth rate of this market is more than 20 in the past couple of years. So there's no question why attackers are motivated by this. And in general, there are also other factors that contribute to their motivation. The first one is the scalability of attacks. Once a vulnerability is found, it may be relevant to many other devices. The second thing is the number of technologies and protocols. Like we mentioned before, many of them are proprietary, which tend to be more vulnerable in some way. And the first thing is the potential risk and fear factor associated with IoT. I mean, attacking your IP camera is different than attacking your computer in the way that you will interpret this. So all of this, again, definitely motivate attackers, and we definitely see it. So IoT botnets are a good example of the scalability we just talked about. If the average botnet contains between thousands and tens of thousands of devices, IoT botnets can be up to 100,000 devices and even millions of devices. So let me share with you some relevant examples, major examples from the past years. So Linux Lite Hydra maybe was the first major IoT botnet. More than 100,000 devices were infected. Bashlight is also a significant example. More than 1 million devices were infected. Many of them were IP cameras and DVRs. Mirai, of course, is maybe the major IoT botnet out there. It gained worldwide attention by disabling the access to many popular services, such as Airbnb and GitHub. Millions of devices were infected. Again, many of them were DVRs. And it's a good question to ask yourself, what will be next? How will this botnet continue to evolve? So let me share with you some relevant challenges that we face while conducting attacks research. The first thing, which is common for many, it's a major challenge in today's technology, bulks of data, the ability to analyze correctly and manipulate the relevant data that we get, and how we manage to understand it and to really pinpoint and lead to a specific attack or campaign on something that is beyond a regular anomaly of a network. And there are many anomalies. The second thing is that today's attacks are much more sophisticated than what they used to be. So, for instance, if we see a specific incident, it may be only a part of the chain. And in order to get the full chain, we have to do some additional tweaks. The first thing is to ask ourselves, is it interesting? For instance, there are many Mirai variants out there. If we see something, is it actually interesting? Is this something new to tell the world in some way? And the fourth thing is the attacker's intention. There are many motivations behind attacks and campaigns and finding new vulnerabilities, and it's a good challenge for us to understand and to truly understand what are the intentions behind specific attacks and campaigns. So let's talk about UPnP, Universal Plug and Play. It's a technology which is basically a set of protocols enabled to advertise, discover, access, and control local network services. It is related to the problem of zero configuration networking, the ability to configure and set up devices on local networks without user interaction. UPnP is implemented by many devices, such as routers, printers, even your Xbox will implement this. UPnP leverages HTTP, usually on top of UDP, with this designated port. And in general, UPnP contains 4 main components. First one is addressing, the ability to assign an address to a device. It's not that common. It's very common. Also IP deal with it. Discovery, the ability to search and advertise services within a network. For instance, once a device is initiated, you would like to advertise its services, and I am, as a device, would like to know other services within my network. The first thing is description, the ability to retrieve the relevant device description and capabilities. Once I understand that there is a service in my network, I would like to know what can I do with this. And the fourth thing is control, the ability to send actions to a device service. This component specifically is relevant to our story, as we will see later on. And simple service discovery protocol, SSDP, is the major protocol for UPnP in general, and more specifically to advertisement and discovery of network services. Again, it is based on HTTP over UDP. It will most likely come with this designated port. And it basically contains 2 major messages, notify and msurge. Notify is a message, a multicast message, enables the device to advertise its services once the device is initiated or periodically. And msurge is a multicast message, enables the device to discover services within a network, which is interesting, for instance, for attackers. Think about that with one multicast message, you will be able to gain many relevant data regarding and info regarding the network that you are in. So let's analyze, for example, this notify request. This is a normal notify request, not an attack or something. We can see that this is on top of HTTP, on top of UDP, although HTTP usually comes with the TCP. We can see that the destination IP is this multicast address, which is usually used in those protocols. The cache control is a mechanism that will tell you how long is this message valid. The location is a mechanism that will give you a specific path to the device descriptor, a file that will contain additional data regarding the device and the service and its capabilities. And it will tell you additional info regarding the service, for example, print basic. And again, the server will also tell you additional info regarding the service and the device. Okay, so let's talk about major SSDP attack concept. SSDP amplification attack, and then we'll talk about two vulnerabilities that were found lately, just to give you a glimpse of vulnerabilities in UPnP. So SSDP amplification attack is very similar to DNS amplification. It means to send requests in which the reply will target a spoofed IP. Usually, it is composed of a botnet that sends message request and asks for all relevant data regarding the UPnP services. And the victim, the spoofed IP, will receive a very large amount of SSDP traffic, and it will most likely result in a denial of service. So the flow is that each infected device in the botnet will send an message request in order to understand what are the devices within a network, and will send it with the source IP, which is basically the victim. And then all the relevant devices, the relevant services that support UPnP will assemble a response and send it to the spoofed IP. And in many cases, it means a denial of service. We can say that this method really rose in the last couple of years by hundreds of percent. And those are two vulnerabilities that were found last year. Both are very similar in the mechanism. In both, the XML purging engine for the SSDP functionality is vulnerable to XML external entity attack. In both, the attacker leverages SSDP discovery mechanism in those products. They will send message request, and the attacker can respond with a fake device service. And then he will use the mechanism of location, the device descriptor, in order to contain a malicious code in the XML. And it will wrongly parsed by the XML engine of the vulnerable operating system or application. So let's dive in the views XML external entity attack. So views, if you assume you are familiar, is a Botnet client used to transfer files via the Botnet protocol. Views sends message request in order to try to discover UPnP services within a network. And once the attacker detects the message request, will assemble a response for a new service that contains the location path. And following its mechanism, views will send a GET request to the path in order to get a file, since it's the device descriptor of that service. For example, we can see here that the IP 1.93, which is the views client, will send message request, and 1.93, which is the attacker, will send a response with this location, and this location will contain a malicious XML file. And afterwards, the views client, again, 1.93, will create a TCP session and download this file. And you can leverage it in order to do many interesting things. Great. I would like also to share with you that there are many relevant tools out there. I don't encourage you to use them, but you need to be familiar with them. For instance, SSDP Evil tool, it's a tool for spoofing SSDP replies. Again, mostly it's a response to message request by many application operating system that assemble such request. It creates a fake UPnP device in order to trick users to visit a malicious phishing page, for example. It can also detect and exploit XML external entity attacks. like we saw before. And this is a very common tool for hackers. Okay, so it was just another lovely day on sunny checkpoint offices in Tel Aviv. We drank coffee, and then we noticed a bulk of suspicious post requests with this unknown high port. We can say that in general we have many incidents like this, and this is again a significant challenge for us to determine whether those are relevant or not. And in our case, they were definitely relevant. So we noticed that those were UPnP requests, like we talked just a minute ago. More specifically, they targeted the control component, the ability again to send actions to a specific service using SOAP technology, XML-based technology. And we noticed that those requests target those specific Huawei routers in which the UPnP service was exposed to external traffic with this unknown port, although UPnP is intended to use in local networks. And more specifically, we noticed that those requests target a specific mechanism in those routers, device upgrade, the ability to remotely upgrade your router's firmware. And those post requests include a payload that contain two interesting and relevant XML-based elements, new status URL and new download URL. Eventually, we noticed that there was no proper validation on those elements. So let's analyze a specific request. We can see that this post request targets a specific path, device upgrade, using SOAP technology. We can see that it uses the upgrade service action. And we can see that it contains the new status URL and new download URL. And we can also see that those commands were injected to this request. So, of course, our next step was to run this command and see what happens. And basically, download this payload from this given IP. And the results were interesting. A Saturi, a Mirai variant, was actually downloaded. Again, so our next step was to run this file. And the results were interesting. And this is a picture demonstrating the detection ratio of this file before we published our conclusions. And we can see that this is 1 out of 58. And we see that after following our publication, the detection ratio rose significantly. So, once started, the bot tries to resolve the CNC server IP with legitimate DNS request. The domain was hard-coded in the file. Then it initiates a TCP connection with the CNC server using this unknown port. And it has two hard-coded requests that are used to check in. And those are the bytes that were sent. For example, we can see here that those 6 bytes were sent over TCP. The bot sends to the CNC server. And from now on, the bot waits for CNC server commands and acts. So the main purpose of this bot, like many other botnets, is to flag targets with crafted packets in order to cause a denial of service. The CNC communication is based on proprietary protocol over TCP. And the CNC sends the relevant parameters for the attack, and the bot attacks. We can see here that those 6 bytes were sent over TCP, and when the first 2 bytes were 0107 or 0000, it means to send the crafted packets in order to cause a denial of service. The last 4 bytes are parameters for the attack. For example, attack a specific segment, subnet. So the attack flow is as follows. Fake firmware upgrade packets are sent to vulnerable Huawei routers. Then Saturi, a Mirai variant, is downloaded. Afterwards, the bot connects the CNC server. And from now on, it waits for command and acts in order to cause a denial of service by using FADI. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the impact of this attack. We can say that in general, This attack gained worldwide attention, and it rose the public awareness to Mirai variants. It was a year after Mirai was first discovered, and it was a significant finding. We've seen more than 500,000 attack attempts, which is a lot, and this campaign was worldwide in a major component of the world. United States, Brazil, South Africa, Spain, Russia, and there are many, many more countries, Japan. And it was in various industries. The most popular ones were communications, transportation, software vendors, but basically every industry was affected by this. And afterwards, this CV was assigned to this vulnerability. It was born in some way, like this baby. And once we detected and investigated this case, we disclosed our findings to Huawei. And in the next following days, they confirmed and patched this vulnerability through the security notice. I think that this is a good example for collaboration between companies in order to help the security community be more secure than the world in some way. So this campaign was really, really impressive. So we asked ourselves, who is behind this story? And the answer is Nexus Zeta. But what actually is Nexus Zeta? And how have we managed to conclude that this is Nexus Zeta? We'll find out now. So our first assumption is that due to the impressive traffic volume and the new zero-day and the multiple attack servers, it must be a pro-hacker team, maybe even a nation state. But the results were different and interesting. So our process in general is to look for indicators that will help us understand who is behind this attack. And eventually we found a domain that was belonging to this botnet, Nexus IoT Solution, and it was registered under this email address, Nexus Zeta. And after investigating this nickname, we found an active threat actor on hack forums. And this is an example for a question that he asked. You can see here, for example, that he asked, hello, I'm looking for someone to help me compile the Mirai botnet. Interesting. Although we previously thought that it must be a pro-hacker team, you can see that this question is pretty not sophisticated in some way. So we can also say that Nexus Zeta was active on Twitter and GitHub. This is an example for his Twitter profile. So what first thought as a pro-hacker team, maybe even a country, turned out to be a motivated amateur hacker. You can also say that he has managed to acquire some enemies that eventually exposed his real identity. His name is Kenneth Sushman, a 20-year-old guy from Washington. And this is a publication that was following his arrest. This is another publication. Looks like a decent guy. So what I would like you to take from this lecture is that understanding that today the situation is different than when it used to be 10 and 15 years ago. Today, you don't have to be that pro in order to lead to such disastrous results. Leaked malware code and poor IoT security and an hacker that is familiar with the terms is pretty new to this field can lead to such results. And this is not the first time that we see it. The second thing is the understanding that UPnP and SSDP attacks increased in the last couple of years, and we expect that this phenomenon will continue. And the first thing is that with friends like Kenneth has, who basically needs enemies. They exposed his identity and led to his arrest. And this is his profile picture on Twitter. Keep calm and keep hacking. I don't encourage you to hack, but if you will try to do so, we'll catch you. So thank you very much, and it's your time for questions. Yes?
Just curious, the symbol on his tag, isn't that the symbol for one of the Google augmented reality games? Yes.
Yes? Interesting.
Not necessarily for this talk specifically, but just with your background, I'm really curious. How many of these people were brought down from human intelligence versus like following their digital trail? Because it sounded like this guy was exposed by, was it like him, you know, LulzSec was brought down by an informant. Like, it seems like more people were brought down by their friends than actually, you know, the way you see it on TV.
I see. So first, the fact that this domain was registered under this nickname, and this nickname was associated with this Gmail account, is actually not that sophisticated. For example, there are cases in which it's much more tougher to detect the threat actor, the hacker behind it. So this is the first thing. Second thing is that nowadays we have to understand that it's difficult not to have some digital record in some way. But I agree with that again, this is you have to have good friends. I mean, they didn't help him in this case, but it's actually a very, very interesting challenge to not be detected in nowadays. Simple and quick things you can do is not to associate the domain for your Gmail account and be active on thread on hack forums, but even much more sophisticated steps can be traced in some way. More questions? Yes.
Was there any other connections to him to the attack other than him registering his domain under his name?
No. But once we found this, it was pretty simple. But no, there was anything. There wasn't anything else. Actually, it's pretty interesting to. It's a good question to ask yourself: how have we managed to find this vulnerability? Since it was a 0 day, we couldn't find any records regarding any knowledge regarding this vulnerability or surges regarding these Huawei routers. So this is maybe an interesting question regarding this. Any other questions? You can ask in general, not about this topic. Okay, great. Thank you very much.